Hey there, and welcome to RecoverED, a podcast from the Magdalen House, a recovery community for alcoholism. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. The RecoverED podcast is made to educate the community on alcoholism, the Magdalen House, our programs, and resources we offer for the community. In each episode, you will get to know the disease of alcoholism a little better, and soon, you'll know how you can shatter the stigma around alcoholism in your community. With your host, me, Kelsey Amos, a recovered alcoholic and outreach manager here at the Magdalen House. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for listening. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of our podcast. I am really excited for our guest today. She is just, I don't know, her energy, her spirit, just her love of the program shines through. Anytime I see her, talk to her, or see her in her element here at Maggie's. So I'm going to let her introduce herself. So will you give us name, sobriety date, and then tell us how you first got involved here at Maggie's?
Okay, my name is Rosalind. I like to be called Rozzie. My sobriety date is actually January the 12th of 2017.
Oh my gosh, congrats. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
Also, I got involved here as a first step client. I'm an alumni, so I went through the program.
Yeah.
Got here on January the 12th, 2017.
That is awesome.
Yes.
I'm glad you made it.
Me too.
And you've stayed ever since, right?
Yeah, never left.
Yeah. So you're also a staff member. So when did you come on staff?
It's kind of vague, but I want to say I came on staff in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay.
2019. Yes,
Awesome.
a couple years sober. I came on staff. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. So today we're going to be talking all about spiritual principles. So part of step 12 is, well, I'll just say step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening. As the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. So I feel like a lot of times when we talk about step 12, the main focus is that like sponsorship and carrying the message. But this practicing principles is so vital. So can you tell us, where do the spiritual principles come from? Like, how do we get these principles that we're supposed to practice?
Well, from my understanding, each step actually highlights one of the principles.
Mm-hmm.
So, step 1, is honesty, those kinds of things. So they highlight certain principles to look out for, mm-hmm. or to, incorporate into your life. And that's done, basically through the 12 steps. It stands out, but they're all part of all the steps, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain principles that stands out, every time you focus on a step. Yeah.
Absolutely. What has it been like for you to learn how to apply spiritual principles in your life?
Well, it was quite difficult in the beginning, honestly. Drinking and things like that, I look back and I know how defiant that lifestyle can be.
That's a good word, defiant. Yeah. I love it.
It's definitely defiant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to admit that, though, because, there's a lot of delusion around, I'm not hurting anybody. Mm-hmm. I'm just doing this to get by. And, but the truth is that knowing, drinking is a defiant lifestyle. So for me to come in, to the 12 steps or to any like recovery program and be told, oh, okay, now you need to be honest, or you need to, be of service, that's like totally the opposite of, what I've been doing,
right.
Obviously. So, yeah, it wasn't easy. It's still not easy, right? It gets a little bit better, a little bit easier. But in the beginning, it was pretty difficult to grasp. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. was there like a point for you where you realized, oh, I'm showing up differently now? I don't know, like that aha moment of, oh, this is a situation where I would have done something completely different, and now, God's in control or whatever. Can you think of a time like that?
There's been quite a few times like that.
Yeah.
I mean, many times. I can kind of look back on some of the first times, you had this beautiful lady sponsoring me that was pretty much, kind of guiding me through the principles, So when I was disturbed, she would remind me, of a principle versus, a human instinct,
Yeah.
common sense. She didn't ever tell me, what a normal person would do in that situation. She would tell me, what a spiritual person, would do in that situation. And then, I would have to choose, okay, am I going to do it the way that I always, have reacted to things, or am I going to take her advice and try this out? And that's kind of what it was like. I'll give you an example. When I got sober, maybe in the first 6 months or so, my son was hurt at school by a kid. Gave him a black eye, actually, and he was like 8 years old. And I was livid, it really upset me, and, really overreacting, and wanting to do sorts of things that wasn't in line with the spiritual principles. And I called my sponsor instead, and she said, well, we're not allowed to, go off on people and, those kinds of things. She said, the thing that I would suggest that you do is, put your personal feelings to the side and think more about the other people who are involved. So, yeah, it was really hard. I had to take my son to the ER, and then, I ended up calling that parent and kind of finding out more about what was going on with the kid and at home, and, more thinking of other people versus what was happening to me, how I felt about it. It was, yeah. So, yeah, that was kind of my first, kind of shock to, hey, the spiritual principles are different than what I would normally do as a human being.
Right.
Yeah, this is kind of above, my own emotions and feelings and thoughts. Yeah.
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 It just reminds me of the line in the book. I don't know, what page is it on? 27, I think. Yeah, Dr. Young. He says, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And so I feel like that's kind of what you were talking about, right? Is like we get to choose, like, am I going to act out in the same old behaviors, or am I going to live by this new set of principles that I get from working the steps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, you have to practice, though. It's
Right.
not like you automatically default to the spiritual principles. I think that's important to point out,
What does that look like for you to practice these principles in all of your affairs? Because that's actually one of my next questions. So, because I think it's easy to say, like, oh yeah, I just practice these spiritual principles, but I'm like, what does that look like?
Well, it basically looks like you get to go anywhere, and you build relationships, and you show up, and the best way that you can. And if you make a mistake, you kind of have this compass. Was I doing my normal character, my normal reactions, or was I doing the principles that I'm being taught around this situation? And you see it clear. Everything starts to clear out. The steps, I think, are very transparent in the way that they clear the path for decision making, choices. Was I being kind today, or was I not being kind and intolerant? It's really basically a compass. There's a map
Yeah.
You practice by living life and continue to live life. Like, for instance, a lot of things I wouldn't do because I wouldn't want to be in a position where I was at a disadvantage, or that it wasn't going my way, or I didn't feel good, or it was uncomfortable. And I think today it's more like, do it anyway. And if any of that stuff comes up, practice these principles in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned when you make a mistake, right? Because that's like, we have tools for that. You know what I mean? We have tools like what we learned through the steps is, because I'm human, right? I'm flawed. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail. We're going to fall short. But we get tools and principles like humility, right? To correct that. So my next question is there an area of your life where it has been more challenging? Because it says practice these principles in all of our affairs, right? So is there an area of your life where it's been more challenging to practice principles, to be more spiritually fit in that area compared to others?
I think mainly, I would say intimacy. I definitely, for some reason, when it comes to intimacy, it's hard for me to see the spiritual side of that. That becomes more of a self-centered area of my life, right? And so maybe today it's not, as difficult, but I remember in the beginning, I've been told that spirituality is my solution, right? And then I go out and intimately, I'm being selfish, and it's obvious, I want, and I'm talking about, an intimate relationship with another person. And so I didn't really see, the God-given powers in that. It just seemed like it was a transaction. It was more selfish than anything else for me. And then I started to grow in that area because that's where I had to do the most praying. Is this, even though this may feel good, I may like this person, or all these things are going on, it's still not up to me. If that person is going to decide tomorrow, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't want to do this with you, So I have learned a lot about the principle of, I guess, brotherly love, to a sense that people don't really belong to me. Along with my children, my family, it's really that principle in itself, I think, is the biggest for me. Because people aren't objects. They don't, they're not here for my own pleasure. Maybe I get to spend time with somebody or be with them, but I only get to do that. So I think that's kind of where the principles for me have been the most difficult, and I've grown the most in that area.
Thank you for talking about that. Because as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, me too. Me too. I think relationships, it's, I always tell my, the women that I work with and things like that we write a sex inventory for a reason, so I completely relate to that.
I think, man, I can't imagine how I survived on my own instincts. I wasn't doing very well. And I thought I was,
Yeah.
But I look back and I go, man, how, I was exhausted when I got here. That helped too, because I had already tried to manage everything. And once again, it had collapsed. So human resources had failed me. So I was, and to this day, I still feel the same way about spirituality as I did, shaking from detox. It saved everything for me. And I thought it wasn't enough. Like when they told me, that I needed to live, by these principles. And I thought, man, you don't get it, man. This is bigger than that. But there's nothing bigger than this.
If you or someone you know is an alcoholic seeking to learn foundational tools to sustain and grow in their recovery, check out the Next Step program here at the Magdalen House. Next Step is a 3-phase non-residential program that lasts approximately 3 months and consists of recovery education, group meetings, mentorship with meeting chairs, and more. It is open to any alcoholic at any stage of their recovery at absolutely no cost. To complete a phone screening and see if you qualify, call 214-324-9261 or visit our website at magdalenhouse.org/nextstep. So when you came into the program, did you have some kind of spiritual life? Like, did you have that foundation before?
No. No. I mean, I probably, if you'd have asked me that when I got here, I probably would have told you yes. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, and you kind of have to understand the difference between self-reliance and God-reliance. And you don't come in the doors knowing the difference. Like I said, there's a lot of delusion. So, no, I did not have anywhere near a comprehension of something being more powerful than me. You know, I thought, I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps. I had to be strong. I had to be smart, I had to achieve, so many things in order to be whole. And they had to all come from me. So, no. Was I atheist? No. But I was surely agnostics.
Yeah.
Surely agnostics.
Yeah.
Unknowing, that I was.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that, because if you would have asked me, I would have said, yeah, I mean, I'm a believer. I believe there's something that's in control, but never did I ever consider relying on that something. And that's two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What got you to that point?
Alcohol.
Yeah. Just like the book says, right? Alcohol is a great persuader.
Truth, it is true. I didn't trust myself. I still don't trust myself. I don't believe I know what's best for me or for anyone else. I still don't believe that. And I was convinced that I could not stay sober without help for the first time. I mean, I would go to treatment and, I would be convinced, oh, now that I know, I can do this. And after so many attempts, so many failed attempts at managing well, I was convinced, it's you. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. So as you were going through the steps with your sponsor, was there ever anything related to like the spiritual principles or like what you were doing in that? Because you said earlier, we get the principles from the steps, right? We learn them as we're working the steps. Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time during that where you're like, I'm not doing that? Or I don't really see why I need to do that?
There were a lot of times that I felt that way. A lot of times that I felt that way. But obviously, that doesn't hold depth and weight, right. What I feel and what I think. It didn't have enough depth and weight. So what she said did. Give you an example. In step 3, step 3 has really been kind of sticking with me. There's this faith, right? I think that's probably the principle for step 3. And it's easy to say, I have faith, but it's another thing to actually experience that you had faith when certain things happen to you. Right. And give you an example, my sponsor had me going to Oak Cliff. I was about a couple of weeks sober, and I live in the suburbs or whatever, and I was going into the hood every Friday night, past the places where I would get drunk and go missing. And so I had to pass it to get there to carry the message. And at night on the freeway by myself, and I was sure my car was going to pull over at the liquor store. Like, I would drive literally just like grasping the steering wheel and just gritting my teeth, like thinking that my car would pull over any moment, right? On my way there. And one day I remember calling her and saying, are you sure I should be out here? Because I thought I should be, at home in the suburbs, in my home, kind of away from, danger, being out where, the road, where the liquor stores are and all that. And she said, yeah, I'm sure. That's where the alcoholics are. And when she said that, I was, still thinking about drinking, and, I still, had I was just really, literally holding onto my steering wheel, going to this commitment and going back home.
Yeah.
And like thinking, man, I escaped disaster each time I did it. And as I did that, I learned faith. I learned how to trust God versus me. Remember, I wanted to be home, kind of away from all of that, because I didn't want to drink.
Yeah.
But instead, I was out at night in my car, in the trenches on the front line, and as I look back, that saved my life. I probably would not be here today had I not done exactly as she told me to do, in spite of my fears, and that built faith. That's where my faith started, right there. Yeah.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
That was also my first commitment to carry the message, was right where I used to run around and get in trouble and, get messed up and all of the crazy. And when I realized where it was, I'm like, oh, I can't go there. I can't go there. My sponsor's like, yeah, you can, and you will, because you're going to carry the message to women who need to hear it. And I was just like, oh, okay, but it's really cool having that experience of going back into those places as a different person, as a principled, recovered woman.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And I think, now that you mention it, that did build my faith. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. The fact that I didn't pull over to the liquor store made me believe that there was something more powerful, moving me forward. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any more stories like that?
I do. I have a lot of stories about the principles, honestly.
Yeah, share some. Because I think that's a question, and you've done the Next Step group speakers, so I'm sure they asked you, give us examples, right? Yeah. So give us some examples of what does that look like?
Well, there's a few of my favorite. Step one is honesty. And first of all, I think that Maggie's does well at telling people exactly what step one is. But the one thing that we can't teach people is, how does that apply to you? And what are your experiences, right? So I can tell you that there's a allergy, but your own experiences can tell you something totally different, right? And there's a lot of delusions around the choice part of it, right? A lot of times I say I wasn't ready. Why did I go to treatment and relapse? I wasn't ready. And that wasn't truthful. That's not the truth. That's a lie. I was ready. I was ready every time I ever tried to get sober. The truth is that I wasn't capable of doing it. That's kind of what honesty really is. And that's still, that's important every day for the rest of my life. The truth is that if I ever drink again, my body is going to do the same thing that it did the last time.
Right.
That I went on that 3 or 4 month bender after 10 years of quote unquote not drinking. And I still remember, the physical part of it, how horrible it was. But the second part of the unmanageability was just so clear after, Maggie's explained it to me. It was just so obvious. I had never, ever saw the truth in my own experiences as I did this time. And it made a difference, because I wasn't going to go out and try some plan. Or, book says that I've had these experiences hundreds of times,
Yeah.
And so I was out of, plans. There's no way for me to pull it off.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to pull it off. I might stay sober for a little while, but, eventually, something trivial. I'll accept some trivial reason for taking a drink. So I think honesty and it's a different kind of honesty. It's not like I'm telling lies about my drinking or, I'm hiding liquor or, that's not the honesty we're talking about. The honesty is that I'll always have this body. I'm not going to get a new one. And I don't really have a choice if it's up to me. It's called unaided will. The unaided will drink. So that's, to me, is the best principle that I was ever given, is to know my truth.
Yeah. Know
my truth. So no more, shenanigans. All that has been like dissolved,
Well, and I think it's the most important, right? Because if I don't know my truth, I'm going to keep getting filled with that or overrun with that delusion that one day I'm going to be able to control it, right? That mental obsession is going to stay running the show,
Yeah.
So I love the way you worded that. That's just so beautiful.
Oh. So, they're all so, my biggest one is humility.
That one can be so hard sometimes. I don't know about you, but I got an alcoholic ego that rebuilds quickly.
I remember you saying that, Kelsey. That stuck with me forever. One time you and I did a workshop together and you said that my ego will rebuild itself.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Yeah, so I always will have that going on. But it's in the back seat. It's in the back seat of humility. And every now and then I look back at that ego and say, I see you back there.
Yeah.
Oh, you back there. Hi.
Yeah.
But humility is in the front seat. And it took me a long time to figure out what that meant to me. Because in the beginning, it was more like, groveling, the self-esteem thing,
Yeah.
I need to put myself less than what I think I am in order to be humble. And that's not true. That's another delusion. Humility to me doesn't have anything to do with my self-esteem. I'm still the person that, is capable of doing beautiful things. We all have lots of gifts, right? But for me, humility is knowing that I can only go so far.
I like that. A lot of women that I've talked to can relate to that. We tend to be very shame driven. We come in like we're either like egocentric or we're shaming ourselves constantly and we're not good enough and we're never going to be good enough, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I had this pivotal moment when a woman that I love and admire told me, shame is just another form of arrogance. It's just on the other end of the spectrum. It like blew my mind. And she was like, humility is being right-sized.
Yeah.
It made so much sense.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, one more. What else do you love?
Discipline. Oh my gosh. I remember discipline like it was yesterday. It was Maggie's. It was really Maggie's because they had these rules, And they seem real simple, right? And they read them every day. And I started to think about, well, what if I actually attempted to follow them? Because I'm a rule breaker. I'm a rebel.
Same. Yeah.
If my mother told me don't do something, I couldn't wait to do it.
Right. Yep.
It's like as soon as she goes in the house, I can't wait to do that. Yeah. She told me not to do. Yeah. That's how I was my whole life. It got me into a lot of consequences. But at the root of that is undiscipline, defiance, by nature, right? But they say in alcoholics, it's an extreme. And mine has always been extreme. And when I first decided, that I would give this program, a fair shake, like I was actually going to do it. I wasn't going to talk about it. I wasn't going to think about it. I wasn't going to analyze it. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I would actually go line by line, in the book on how to pray, how to react when you're upset. What do you do if you're angry? What do you do if you're afraid? I would just literally, read what it said and emulate that, right? And discipline is one of those things, right? But for me, when I started following those rules, it goes back to those rules at Maggie's. A lot of them didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I was like, and I wanted to say, why are we doing this? But I didn't. Why is it like this?
Yeah.
You know, and as a matter of fact, I was afraid to say why. Because, you know, I drank over why my whole life. You know, why me? Why can't I do it? Why can't I have wine with dinner? Why can't I be normal, a normal drinker, right? So at this point, I'm just doing whatever the rules are to the best of my ability. But then one day, as I'm, you know, going through my life, I'm on my job, you know, I'm showing up, doing whatever I'm, you know, they asked me to do. And I realized, wait a minute, it's not Maggie's that's disciplining me. It's not this job that's disciplining me. It's God has disciplined me through these different channels. Yeah. It wasn't that I needed to do things right to feel, you know, I've done that too, by the way. I was Miss Do-Gooder. So now that I know how defiant I am, how much of a rule breaker I am, I'm going to do good. And that's how I'm going to stay sober. I remember doing that. This isn't the same thing I'm talking about right now.
Right.
This was more, I'm going to do it the way someone else wants it done. And I don't need to know why I'm doing it this way. Because I'm not really doing it for them. I'm doing it for God.
Yeah.
That's where that principle came in at for me. It wasn't about where, you know, my job or, you know, was I following the rules at Maggie's and not getting into the log. You know, it wasn't about that. It was more about, am I going to just do things that people ask me to do and not worry about how it affects me?
Right.
And what I can get out of it.
Yeah.
So
doing it because it's the right thing to do and it's what God would have us do.
Absolutely.
Versus doing the right thing because it makes us look good. Right? So what would you say to someone who is struggling with, you know, living by spiritual principles?
I would say never, ever, ever give up and give yourself some grace and get used to making mistakes. Because for me today, even, you know, today, like anytime I make a mistake, it is an opportunity for me to grow. It really is. It's like, as soon as I mess up, I say to God, I say, here I am. It's me again. It's me again. Yeah. You know, I just did XYZ.
Yeah.
And I just realized, you know, that I don't have to have it all together. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to know what I'm doing. I don't have to be doing all the right things. You know, I just have to be willing to ask for help.
Right.
You know, when I mess up, I have to be willing to say, you know, I messed up. What can I do? What should I do? And quickly get through that. As, you know, because that whole thing where, oh, I messed up and being stuck there, oh man, that's freaking miserable.
Oh yeah. we don't want to live there anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
That vulnerability is so powerful. Vulnerability, authenticity, like these are things we learn through the steps too of correcting those mistakes, like allowing ourselves to make mistakes and correcting them.
Yeah. Because the whole thing is being useful. So if I'm so busy thinking that I'm messed up, then how am I being used, you know?
Right.
Because I'm good enough to be used in spite of myself. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because if I'm shaming myself, who am I thinking about? Me?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Man, I could talk forever about, you know, that selfishness and shame and all of it. But
yeah.
Is there anything that you want the listeners to know about Maggie's in general?
Oh, my God, Maggie's. I think Maggie's is a great opportunity to practice these principles. Definitely, you know, when I was in the house, I mean, that was the social part of it. You're constantly around different personalities, different people. Working here has been, what a journey of the love and kindness and love and tolerance. And I want to read something. I did pick something out to read. So I'm in the house. I'm really thinking about like what's going on in the house. People are not doing it the way I think they should do it. I'm not spiritually fit. I'm calling my sponsor and I'm like, hey, this is, these people are doing this. People are doing that, Yeah. And she, one thing I love about the Maggies and I love about this book is that there's actually a solution for everything, right?
Yes.
To our problems, right? You just
Any problem you could ever have.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So my favorite on the spiritual principles is actually in There Is a Solution. Believe it or not, it's, working with others is step-by-step instructions on working with others and practicing these principles. But in the beginning of the book, believe it or not, it prepares me for this journey. On the bottom of page 19, it says, most of us sense, this is like the third line from the bottom, most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions or attitudes, which makes us more useful to others. This is the practical application of applying these principles that I'm reading. Mm-hmm. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs, which is the whole purpose of the principles.
Right.
And it is part of how am I recovered. It's the difference between being sober and being recovered.
Yeah.
Is those principles. Is how are they showing up in my life.
I'm so glad you said that because that is just a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, that's it. That's all I have right now.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience with us and your beautiful spirit. And I really hope for all my listeners, I hope that you can just pick up on the incredible energy that Rozzie has.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today, and we will see you next time.
This has been RecoverED, hosted by Kelsey Amos, and brought to you by the Magdalen House. I am Laurie Evans, host of the Hope for the Family podcast series. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services that we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.